Well, the time I met John Lennon, he was with Harry Nilsson.
Oh, Harry Nilsson.
Yeah. And Harry Nilsson was unconscious, and John Lennon was banging on an electric piano, screaming at me, telling me what a worthless piece of shit he was and how he couldn't write a song.
All right, ladies and gents, gather round. We got value going once, truth going twice, sold for a song. That's right, folks. Rights signed away, data given away, pennies on the play. Publishing, gone. Credit, missing. Ownership, kiss it goodbye. 50 pages of catch-22s, no dice. You can't eat a like, a follow, or a view. Sold for a song. But wait now, hold your bids, hold your breath. Here comes the truth louder than the bass lines. Time to take it back, where the artists rise, the system shakes, and the silence finally breaks.
Welcome to Sold for a Song, the transformative podcast that dissects the music industry's long-standing practice of undervaluing its most essential contributors. Yes, we're talking songwriters and artists. In each episode, we'll delve into the journey of recognizing and elevating the true worth and value of music creators, discover how the industry has exploited creators, and learn actionable strategies to revolutionize this trend and take control of your career. Hello, podcast land. I'm Terrance Sawchuk, but you can call me Terry. After 30 plus years in the trenches of the music industry, trust me, I've seen it all. The highs, the heartbreaks, and the resilience it takes to succeed as a creator. Here's what I've learned. Awakening your self-worth, owning and leveraging your value, and streamlining the process to free up the time we need to do what we most love to do, which is create. That's what stands between you and the freedom we're all chasing. All right, before we dive in, if you believe in empowering artists and redefining what it means to thrive creatively, do me a favor, subscribe, leave a quick review, and share this episode with someone who truly needs it. That one click helps more than you know. And if you want to go deeper, join me at terrancesawchuk.com to be a part of the community and follow all of my endeavors for exclusive content and updates. My guest today is someone who's quietly shaped the soundtrack of our lives from behind the scenes. Patrick Clifford has spent decades in A&R with labels like Epic, A&M, Chrysalis, Capitol, BMG, and Disney Music Publishing. Along the way, he's worked with legends like James Taylor, Cat Stevens, Etta James, Ziggy Marley, Miami Sound Machine, Blues Traveler, the Neville Brothers, and the Romantics, just to name a few. Patrick's career is proof that the people who champion the songs, who fight to protect the spark of the artist, are just as essential as the artists themselves, and that's why he's the perfect guest for Sold for a Song. Today we're diving into what it really means to nurture artists and how the role of A&R has evolved in an age of streaming and algorithms. Folks, I am lucky enough to have my good friend Patrick Clifford here, some would say the Pope of Nashville.
The Pope of 5 Points.
The Pope of 5 Points, or I thought it was the Pope of Nashville or the Mayor of 5 Points, or vice versa.
Well, people used to say the Mayor of Nashville, and I said, I don't want to be the Mayor of Nashville. Then I have to care about potholes and bad country music. And then a friend of mine, Jonathan Levine from Wasserman, one day called me up during the pandemic, and he said, you know what, you're sort of like Pope Pius III or IV. And I'm thinking, what's he talking about? And I started Googling these guys in the 1300s, and they were both very, very good to artisans and craftspeople. I thought, well, it'll be great. I'll be the Pope of 5 Points. So
love it. And the potholes here, by the way, for people who haven't been to Nashville, you can farm trout or salmon in the holes that they have here. It's like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath pothole.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want the job of tending to all that. So every time, obviously, I do a bunch of research, and every time I have a guest, and even though you're a long time friend, I know so much about you, I'm always amazed at how much I don't know about somebody when I start researching them. My favorite part of your career are the days of New York. There's this romanticism to it. There's this old school music business vibe to it that I really miss, that kind of era, and I'm sure you do.
You and me both, pal.
Yeah, I really want you to kind of take us back to how that all started in New York City. I have the luxury of knowing so many stories from behind the scenes from you, from, smoking weed in the Dakota with Yoko Ono, and we can go on and on and on, but I really want people to hear that kind of, I'm probably going to title this podcast is going to be, New York State of Mind or something. Right. And obviously bring us back where you started up to where you are now.
Well, I was very lucky. There was a lot of music in my house, even though I never played music. I played bad bass guitar and rhythm guitar. Obviously, after seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan, everybody wanted to be in bands. And, music was so important in the 60s and 70s between the Vietnam War and the civil rights movement and the generational gap that was happening between my then parents' generation and me as a young lad in New York and D.C. and Pittsburgh. Those are the three towns that we really grew up in. But New York was always home for me. But the point being is music was so important to every element of things that were going on. And there was such amazing escapism with music.
Right.
I'd never been to England, but I listened to every English band and every singer-songwriter I could possibly listen to. I'd never been to Muscle Shoals, but I saw album covers from, recording sessions there. And I'm like, I don't even know where it's at, but I want to go there. And then you heard music from California. I'd never been to California, but you felt like you were there and were part of that. So there was something about music, and again, much of it was curated by great record labels and great personalities and producers and managers. And it was just a different time. And the volume of music now compared to then is night and day. And back then, nobody could get their arms around everything that was out there. It was impossible. There's only 24 hours in a day. But it was so important to every element of my life, where like in high school, I really loved English and history. And my design was to get out of Pittsburgh and get back to New York. And I really wanted to get an education at college that was going to be history and English. And I wanted to go get a law degree. And I wanted to be a politician. I honestly did. I was inspired by John F. Kennedy, by Robert Kennedy, by Martin Luther King, and other people that were great citizens that were leaders in our world. My father worked for the Atomic Energy Commission and for NASA. And he wasn't a scientist; he was a businessman. But I had great faith in our country because of my father and seeing like what he was doing. And, years later, I realized my father probably could have made so much more money working in the private sector, but he was so dedicated to what he did. So the point being is there was a lot of idealism going, racing through our generation. There was a lot of escapism running through it. There was a lot of change going on. There was the need to be proactive, whether you were protesting against the Vietnam War or protesting against racial strife. It was just an amazing time, and music was everywhere. And there were so many people that were writing music about all of those elements as well. So it was omnipresent. And when I went to college, I started booking bands, working at record stores, working at the radio station. But it was really my second or third year I read Clive Davis's first book that came out in the mid-'70s. And he's talking about record companies. And he's specifically talking about Columbia Records and his experience. And I understood the beauty and the romanticism of being with the artists. There was just something, magical. It was like lightning and thunder and big weather, And it was all encompassing. So again, when I was in college, I read Clive Davis's first book that came out. And I understood, again, when he talked about being with Sly and the Family Stone or Bob Dylan or this artist or that, and I understood it because I romanticized about being that guy in that company. But he talked about marketing and promotion and sales and all the things that went in and budgeting. And they talked about batting averages. And it could be like the guy who's only batting 190 on the team is the hero one day, So it just gave me this sense of camaraderie of what it was like working in that kind of environment. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. I want to be an A&R man, artist and repertoire, and I want to work in a record company. And I went back to Pittsburgh after graduating from the University of Dayton in Dayton, Ohio, with my Bachelor of Science degree in Business Administration, which was not what I wanted to do. I wanted to get a BA in English and History. And my father, again, being very pragmatic, said, son, there's a lot of lawyers out there, maybe think about something else. And I had been very inspired by a gentleman named Mr. Genge, who was a big advertising guy. But the point being is, I went back and I told my father, I said, Diamond Jim, I'm going to go to New York after I paint the house and mow the lawn. And I was dying to get back to New York and be close to the ocean in New York City. And I'm going to be an A&R guy. And he understood that because he was a record collector. I said, I'm going to get a job in a record company. And I say this there's no slight or any editorial to this, so, just because I want to be politically correct. But that day in 1975, I said to Diamond Jim, I'm going to get a job in a record company. My father looked at me and he said, son, how are you going to do that? We're not Jewish and we're not in the mob. I said, well, what about Uncle Cosmo? He's a longshoreman. He said, you're right. Good luck. And a couple of days later, I ended up going to New York and living in New Jersey and upstate New York with my girlfriend's parents and living with my friend Paul McVeigh and his parents in New Jersey. And about 5 months later, living in New York City, trying to find a job, one, to live, and two, trying to find a way to get into a record company.
My God.
And that was my humble beginning after college. And the first job I had was selling trade advertising to the Hasidic Jewish community on 47th and 46th Street as an Irish Catholic kid, which was an amazing, amazing challenge. And after about 12 months, the guy who owned the company decided to move to New Jersey. I got put on unemployment. I started working for a friend of mine who had a plant company, and I started delivering plants to Andy Warhol's factory, Studio 54, all these incredibly rich people throughout Manhattan, clubs, special events. But one of my accounts was Columbia Motion Pictures, which at that point were starting to fund the beginning of Arista Records and Clive Davis after he left Columbia Records. And there was a man named Alan Hirschfeld who was the president. And I'd go in and water his plants and cut his plants and prune his plants, and I'd beg him, please, Mr. Hirschfeld, call Mr. Davis and get me an interview. And sadly, that never came to be. And then I took another job after that, working at Doubleday Music Book Publishing, thinking very similar, ideas translated into a medium, that being books. I did that for a number of months, and really eye-opening experience, and got to meet Nelson Doubleday and sit in his giant, lavish office, watching helicopters take off from the Pan Am building on the 44th floor of this building on Park Avenue.
No kidding.
And after a while, that didn't work out because the guy that I worked for hated me because Mr. Doubleday liked me. And I literally said, this is not what I want to do. I want to work in the music business. So I went to the Bottom Line nightclub.
Yeah.
February 1978, I met a man there named Jack Leitenberg, who was a kid then like me. I said, I want to work here. And he goes, when can you start? I said, I can start tonight. He said, okay, you get $25 a night. You get one slice of pizza at the end of the night and one free Heineken beer. I'm like, great, what do you want me to do? He said, there's a guy in the back named Warren Zevon.
Come on.
Go help him load his gear in. I had no idea who Warren Zevon was. And it was just funny. As that record was coming out, as Lawyers, Guns, and Money. And he played 2 shows that night. I loaded his gear in, loaded it out. I helped people find seats. I, was a busboy. I was anything that needed to be done. And I did it for 6 months. And it was in that time frame that I met this gentleman, Nat Weiss, who became my mentor, and had a label called Nemperor Records. And the Nemperor is after Nem's record store in Liverpool, because Nat, in the 60s, was an openly gay divorce attorney when you couldn't be openly gay about anything, let alone divorcing people. And he met Brian Epstein. They became friends. Nat went on to become the American manager of the Beatles fan club, then the merchandise, and then the touring, and then he became the American manager of the Beatles, and he became Brian Epstein's partner, and he literally had a management agreement for the last month of Brian Epstein's life where Nat managed the manager of the Beatles.
Come on.
I'm serious.
I have to ask you a question. There was that nightmare merch deal that Epstein signed. Did that have anything to do with that? Because he didn't know that he signed a terrible merge deal where the Beatles and
Right.
he shared 10%, and this company got 90% of all the mop top wigs, all that stuff.
Right.
Was that guy, or was that a different deal?
No, Nat didn't do that deal.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know any of the minutiae of that or specifics of that. I just know the broad stroke of what Nat did.
Gotcha.
And again, to that, when the Beatles broke up after Brian had died, Nat was like, well, I guess we're going back to divorcing people. And as the story has been told to me by a number of people that were around Nat at that point in time, Peter Asher called from England and said, Nat, there's a young man here at Abbey Road making a record. He's from America. He's from North Carolina. And I want you to be his co-manager with me, and I want you to be his attorney. To which Nat said, okay, great. What's his name? Because his name's James Taylor.
James Taylor.
And Nat had no idea who James Taylor was, but he said, okay, stop packing the boxes. We're back in the music business.
Oh, my God. Wasn't that Apple's first signing?
It was, and it was the album called Flying Machine.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. So you spent some time at that label. Were you in the A&R position at this point? Or?
My position, Terry, when I started there, and I started there December 1978, and my position, Nat's office was very small. He had a law firm. He had a management company where he managed Cat Stevens in America, the Mahavishnu Orchestra. The law firm took care of Miles Davis, James Taylor, Bonnie Raitt, Peter Asher, countless other executives and personalities. And then he had the label Nemperor, which had just left Atlantic, and that was dear friends with Ahmet Ertegun and Nesui Ertegun. So I got to spend a lot of time around them. And at that point, he went to CBS, to Epic, Portrait, and the associated labels. He was one of the associated labels. And that's when Walter Yetnikoff was just beginning his rise as the leader of the free world at CBS Records.
I'm looking down at my book. The Hitman is down in that mess over there. And these are all the names that pop up in that epic kind of 70s era.
And it was the Wild West. I mean, I remember one time being in front of what the CBS building on 52nd Street and 6th Avenue, they used to call Black Rock. And I'll never forget being there with Nat and Walter Yetnikoff. And Yetnikoff was so fucking pissed off, because he had just been disinvited by William Paley, who was the chairman of CBS at the time, to not, NOT, come to the shareholders meeting because, you know what, this record business, it's a little, I don't know, it's just not maybe kosher, not clean. And Yetnikoff in his division with this, the record division, was throwing off more cash than television, their radio syndicated, syndications and just stations everywhere, the advertising that they control, and he was just livid. And I didn't really understand at first, but I figured it out after a while that, again, this, the record companies back then were printing money.
Yeah. Well, this is the independence. This is the days of payola.
Yeah.
Not that they've left us; they've just changed form.
It's different. Now you pay for algorithm instead of Al Capone. My job was like to do everything and anything I could get involved in, Literally, the office was small, and I would go to CBS's office, and I'd go try to find out what the marketing plans are for the artists that he had when I got there were Stanley Clarke, Jan Hammer from the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and he had just signed this kid named Steve Forbert from Meridian, Mississippi, who had just made his first record, and my job was to go get it promoted, marketed, sold, take Steve on tour. So it was everything. And I got to sit around with the biggest managers, the biggest executives, the most powerful promoters in the country then. And then, the promoting business back there was like, I don't want to say organized crime, but it was very closed and cloistered business. It wasn't like, AEG and Live Nation, today. It was like feudal systems. And Nat would broker these meetings. But literally, working with Forbert, he was managed by Linda Stein, who was still married to Seymour Stein, from Seymour, from Sire Records. A man I revere and consider a mentor as well. And a fellow named Danny Fields, who worked at Elektra Records for Jack Holtzman. And Danny was involved with the Stooges, the MC5, Tim Buckley, all these amazing artists. And one afternoon, I'd been working there for 2 months. It was February 79. Danny comes into the office and he goes, I just saw the greatest band last night. These 4 guys, these 4 kids from Detroit, and they wear these red leather suits, and they were so attractive and so outrageous, and the rock music. And at that time, not only did they manage Steve Forbert, they managed the Ramones,
Oh, really?
Quite a, dichotomy there of talent. And I'm like, this is Danny Fields telling me about an act. I'm like, I'm going to see these kids. And they played at a room called Hurrahs that was on the Upper West Side, not far from where I lived at that time. And there was a freak snowstorm. Or not, nobody had, AccuWeather or, cell phones. And so most of the city was closed down, but I was able to trudge through the snow, walked by Sire Records headquarters, which was on the Upper West Side, went to Haraz. There were 11 people there. One of them was Seymour Stein, and these kids played, it was the Romantics, and they played like they were going to the electric chair. And they played all these incredible songs, some cover songs, but, you know, What I Like About You was one of those.
No way.
And I'll never forget, they finished, and I'm like, I'm getting to these guys before Seymour gets to them. And I burst into their dressing room, and I said, hey, I work for Nat Weiss, and they're looking at me like, who? And I run Nemper Records, which I didn't run anything, and I'm signing you guys to a record deal. And I'm thinking, like, I don't even know what that means, but I'm signing you guys. And it, you know, and lo and behold, it happened. And, you know, my job then was to go through the material with them all, hire the producer. I hired this fellow named Pete Solly, who was an English producer and had done Reckless Eric and a couple other records that I really liked. And he was the organ player in The Crazy World of Arthur Brown and that song Fire, which is just, you know, amazing. But out of that is where What I Like About You got cut. And to this day, that song, when I hear it, it just makes me, you know, want to jump out of
That's incredible.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so as A&R, you have this honor of really overseeing the making of these records and all of that. But I want to touch on, there's so many great artists that you signed and that you worked with on an intimate level. And I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but please tell us about your favorite artists that you were in the trenches with and signed and discovered. And
well, you know, it's interesting. I have a friend of mine I've just gotten to know who manages the Flaming Lips named Scott Booker, and he also has a music program at Oklahoma Central University. And I did a Zoom call with him in one of his classes, and he said to me, what's your favorite record you worked on? And I said, I have to be honest, every one of them, because every one of them was an honor. Every one of them was a privilege. Every one of them had its challenges. Every one of them had its rewards. Some were bigger rewards in regards to their recognition. But again, between Nat and then when I went to Epic Records for 3 years in California, I didn't really get to sign anything because the guys I worked for just kept passing on the Georgia Satellites and this band called the Living Daylights, which this guy, Rusty Anderson, who's been with Paul McCartney and his right-hand guitar player, that I wanted to sign, you know, years and years ago. But everybody who does this has got hundreds of those kind of stories. Yeah. But going to A&M and working for Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, and I was in New York, but that's where I found Blues Traveler and worked with them, and that to me is one of my favorite times of my life. But I also got to work with the Neville brothers and do the record Yellow Moon with Daniel Lanois.
That was one of my favorite records, and I was a Lanois psycho, being Canadian as well. A huge fan of his production, and he was just this chameleon of the artist from U2 to Dylan to Peter Gabriel, and the way he just stepped into that album again and made it so musical. And that was kind of like a kind of coming back out album for them as a family, as far as I remember.
It was a amazing moment in their lives. It was, I believe, the best record they've ever made, and they had something to really say. There was something on their hearts, or in their hearts, in their souls, on their minds. And when I wanted to sign them at A&M, everybody's like, nope. We put out Fire on the Bayou. That was the best, Neville's record to that moment. And I had to, fight a lot of different people between Herb and Jerry and David Anderley and my friend Steve. And everybody was like sort of against it. But I got Daniel involved because I had signed another band called the Innocence Mission from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And I took Daniel to Philadelphia to see them play. And these kids, they weren't a Christian band, but they were devout Catholics. And there was something really special and also very provincial about who they were as people, but glorious. And it's, what they did musically and who they were as people. And we're coming back from Philadelphia in a car service, and Dan and I are sitting in the back. And this is really the first time I've been with him, other than maybe a casual hi or meeting him at a club. And he said, you know what, I don't know if this is really for me, but if I was going to produce them, this is what I would do. So the 2-hour car ride from Philadelphia was Daniel saying, this is how I'd produce it, which was so amazing, so insightful, so giving of him to share this insight, which he didn't have to do. He could have just sat there and said, I pass. And it was just so educational and inspiring. That's what it also was. It was so inspiring. And we're going through the Holland Tunnel. And I said, Daniel, have you ever seen the Neville brothers? And he goes, well, I never have, but we used Mean Willie Green, the drummer, on Robbie Robertson's records that he was producing at that time.
Oh, no kidding.
And I said, well, they're playing on Wednesday night at Irving Plaza. Will you please be my guest and come see them? And he came to the show, and his friend Chris Blackwell from Island Records was there.
No kidding.
Place was sold out. And again, they played like they were ascending to heaven. And at the end of the night, I said, Daniel, thanks for coming. I'll give you a call the next day or two. I think I either called him on maybe the Thursday or the Friday. No answer. Go to the Vodafone messing machines.
Oh, yeah.
Call him on Friday. His phone's disconnected.
Come on.
I called his manager, my friend Jim Phelan, and I said, Jim, have you spoken to Daniel? No, Patrick, I have not heard from Daniel, but I'll give him a call. So cut to Sunday night. And again, none of us have cell phones. We're just, we've got things on wall or pay phones on a corner in, any place on God's green earth. He calls me up. He goes, Patrick, I've heard from Daniel. I said, good. Is he okay? He's perfectly fine. I said, where is he? He said, he moved to New Orleans. He simply picked up and moved to New Orleans after that night and just immersed himself in Louisiana. Now, and again, being from French-speaking Canada and Acadia, he just dove into it, and I was able to negotiate a deal with him that was far less than what he would have gotten from any other artist at the time because of his stature, because he was just like, I want to do this. And he brought his gear to an abandoned apartment building, it was in the Garden District next to the Columns Hotel where they shot that movie Pretty Baby. And he made that record, and it was just a glorious experience.
Wasn't this the same house where he cut the Emmylou Harris record?
No, that was Kingsway.
Oh, that was Kingsway.
And they found that after they made the Yellow Moon record.
Okay.
And I made a number of records in there. I made the follow-up to that record with the Nevilles called Brothers Keeper.
Yeah.
And Malcolm Byrne produced that. And that's a fantastic record. And then I did an Innocence Mission record there with Dennis Herring. And I did some other stuff there, but it became an incredibly popular studio.
What a fun time. And Malcolm Byrne, working on one of my favorite artists of all time with Chris Whitley's album.
Oh.
That's another story for another day.
When I lived in New York, Chris Whitley lived down the block from me. I'd see him every day at the coffee shop if he wasn't on tour, and he was an amazing human being.
I got a quick story about him where Living with the Law, his album, I gave a copy of. Every time I found an artist that freaked me out, I would give a copy to Alanis back in the day when I worked with her.
Right.
Jeff Buckley. If you don't like this, I'll buy it back from you, kind of thing.
Right.
So Living with the Law was another one. Chris Whitley, wasn't really her normal type of music that you would listen to, and I just listen to this guy's soul. Listen to this. Then fast forward to what was then the next tour after Jagged Little Pill, the second album. Who opens up the entire tour? Chris Whitley.
Right.
And then I see him hugging her backstage with Daniel Lanois in Toronto, thanking her for putting her on this tour. Well, not so many years ago, I got to see him right near the end of his life when he played at 3rd and Lindsley, and there was nobody there. There was a few tables. Right. It was the saddest thing. And I was there soaking up every note. He got off the stage. I didn't know at the time. He was very sick with cancer. He ended up dying like 3 months later. And he got off the stage, and I just went over and I just wanted to say hi. And he said, do you mind if we sit down? And of course. And so he meant on the floor.
Right.
So there we were sitting cross-legged on the floor at 3rd and Lindsley. And I just, told him how much his music meant to me, and that I passed a CD on, to my buddy Alanis back in the day. And he grabbed me by the hand, and he didn't look into my eyes. He literally looked through me and said, did you get me that gig? And I said, I don't know. I just passed on the CD. And he just thanked me for whatever it was worth. That was one of the most beautiful moments of my, not just career, life, because here's somebody that was such an influence on me. And then if I had any kind of help in him helping his career for what he had given back to me, just a moment I'll cherish forever. But
well, isn't that why we did this in the first place?
Exactly.
I mean, again, if I knew...
And you're an anomaly. I just got to say this, not to cut you off, but your people don't exist as much anymore. In the same way that music, now we have video games and internet and blockchain and all these other things to grab our attention. As you said in the beginning of the podcast, it was only music then, or music and films, TV. So that was sort of king on the block, and it got so much more attention. But sort of gone are those days of that type of artist and how they came up through the ranks and how they were practiced musicians and touring, and they had muscle memory. So did kind of the music personalities back then. You don't talk today about the Walter Yetnikovs, and it's just not a thing anymore. Now it's just like through analytics and algorithms and that kind of thing, and it's a much different time. Maybe, for the people that are going to be listening to this and up-and-coming artists, maybe you can help them reflect on what an old-school artist still needs to be able to do, even in this era, in an era where you line up at American Idol, you audition and wonder why you're not a star in 6 months. What was that missing piece that you had the behind-the-scenes view of that people don't maybe know now? What can you share with them?
Well, we live in a world now where everybody is, the transistor radio or the TV is your telephone, and the amount of information that is clogging everybody is overwhelming. And you also have young people who are creators who have grown up creating for this medium that sort of morph into being, or wanting to morph into becoming, musical artists, and have gotten so great at the messaging that they have built these audiences and haven't done the hard work of either playing live or studying music or being in 4 or 5 different bands and being in vans and touring the country and trying to, and finding like-minded people to be artists, to go from what I consider A to Z. We sort of go Z to A now. But there still are plenty of young people coming up that do it because of art, being artists, and then either struggle with learning the new messaging of today with the internet and, DSPs and digital marketing and social media, as opposed to the ones who are the experts in that and think that because they have a command of that they have a command of being great artists with something great and lasting to say. And again, that's not across the board. There's exceptions to everything, and there are real bands and kids out there still that are doing it because they want to do it like their heroes, and whether their heroes were the Ramones or Led Zeppelin or something else. I'm going to meet a bunch of kids from Tallahassee after we do this that are 22 years old, drove up here to play at the Basement. Someone told me about them. He said, I didn't even see them. I just saw them walk across the street and they caught my attention. And I'm like, all right, I want to meet them. And so I spoke to them this morning, and I, got in touch with them through Instagram. I don't have their phone numbers, and I don't do that. And that's not how I like to communicate with people. But the point being is, I think there's still a lot of great art and artists out there. There's so much other stuff that's out there that is messaging, as opposed to artists who are committing themselves to the medium of either recording or playing live and then trying to message that, as opposed to the ones who become really good at messaging and make music also. And because they do that and they have an audience, there's somebody who's a quote-unquote gatekeeper looking at the data chatter and says, this is important because they have an audience. And, record companies have always looked for the easiest route to get to audiences. It's like, go build it, and then we go pour fire on, or water, rather gasoline on the fire. So it's a crazy mixed up time. And I think this, you just got to find your lane and figure out what you want to be and who you are and do it to the best of your ability.
Is it easy to say that, the days of, the manager does all the business and that kind of thing, I just want to do music? I personally think that those days are kind of done now, because you have to do so many things between your own social media and build your own website and that kind of thing. The modern artist has to be fearless in their music and kind of fearless in how they manage their business and how they educate themselves enough to appoint the right people.
Right.
So I always say, the future artist is it's Elon Musk with a microphone. Like, it's somebody that's just involved in all levels, in charge, but not in control, really. So they have to learn the business better than we have in the past, obviously. But just being the, artist on stage is not cutting it anymore. Now you've got to dig a little bit deeper to get noticed, because, it's a 7-second society now on TikTok. Come to my private white-labeled portal that I own this. Right. It's mine. If I want to give you audio files or a different experience or that kind of thing, so I see a changing of the guards happening there, where the new artists are sort of figuring out, going, oh, I've got to be a little bit more business or tech savvy to make it in today's music.
Right. Well, they're all pretty much tech savvy because they grew up with the devices, which we did not grow up with. They have to also, because there's so much out there, and if you're trying to get the attention of an agent or a manager, everybody's, one, so busy, two, they are only paying attention, and I don't mean only, but they're going to pay attention if they see that there's somebody that's built something for them to be able to take to another level and be able to bring whatever resources either they have or they can garner in their relationships with others to bring to that project to move it forward. And again, there's so much of it. I don't know if there's just one way anybody does anything anymore. And it's beholden always about the artist. Even before the internet, it was like this, the best artists were the ones that really loved what they did it with a passion and a verve. There was no plan B, and they did it and also realized they had to be responsible for everything that they possibly could. And if they had to augment that with a manager or an agent, it was only because they brought an expertise that maybe they didn't have. But I think the best artists and the most important artists are all, to some degree, omnipresent in the business of their music and their art, and the business of their business of being an artist.
I'd agree. And we have the train rope back here, so
love trains.
I'll have to give them credit. There's something I find there's a common thread with artists who have been around the block, U2 and Rush. They all end up wanting to own everything. As soon as they get the chance to rewrite a contract or redo a contract, or, Rush famously had this contract clause where if anybody from Atlantic Records ever tried to go backstage during a concert, that they can walk from their contract free and clear with no debt. So and when I was signed to A&M, I remember our marketing person saying, if I want to put just a photo of you two in, say, Now magazine in Toronto, I have to get a hold of The Edge, who's golfing in Germany, Larry's cycling through Africa, and I have to get all four of them and Paul McGuinness to sign off on this photo. I always found it interesting that the bigger the band gets, the more that all control funnels down to them, and they make all the calls.
Right. Well, I mean, who better to police, the messaging, quite honestly. And again, it becomes complicated as things get bigger and bigger. We also, in the last, whether it's 5-10 years, ownership of copyright and master has always been important. It's always been elusive when you show up and you don't have any leverage because you haven't built an audience yet, and you're looking for someone to take on the risk of not only financing it, but being able to go do the legwork with you. And that's sort of, almost a backwards approach now. It's like everybody's like, we got to go do all of this and then find good partners, whether they're record companies, publishing companies, that can bring value to us to get our music out there and do the things that we need to do to message our music. And whether that's getting on a stage or whether that's getting on DSP, or whether that's social media or digital marketing and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, it's more than ever before. And the job of managers is more important now because so people go through distribution companies that do not provide label services. So that all has to be paid for, resourced, managed, and constantly tweaked because everything's changing every 10 minutes.
Yeah. This is where I see AI is going to play a massive role in streamlining a lot of this stuff. It's all going to be kind of streamlined for you because you'll be able to write some plan or initiative out, and then AI will be able to go and do it. Where before you had to hire a bunch of people or get to the point where you have to give up copyright of ownership of master or publishing because somebody else can do a job that you can't do. So we're going to be seeing all of that changing.
Yeah, that is. I don't even know how to even address all of that stuff, honestly, and I'll leave that to somebody else.
I'll deep dive on that for you. I'll take that hit for you. Okay, before we go, please tell me some stories live from the Dakota. Just anything, reflect on anything.
You know, again, when I was at Capitol Records, the gentleman I worked for, we were trying to sign John Lennon. And when I worked for Nat back in the Emperor days, I did get to meet 4 different, Beatles, never at the same time. And the only time I met John Lennon, it was sadly a night when he was out having a big night with Harry Nilsson, and I didn't really meet John Lennon. I got to meet him. He didn't meet me, but I'm sure he didn't need to or care to meet me. But when I was at Capitol Records, the gentleman I worked for asked me to be Yoko Ono's A&R person, because she was signed to Capitol.
Yeah.
And again, Sean was maybe 16, 17 years old, so he's a minor. And obviously his father's gone at that point, well gone. And so I go and meet her at St. John's the Divine, which is a giant cathedral up in Harlem. And I meet Yoko Ono. She's having a benefit for Keith Haring, the artist who had passed away. And I talked to her, and she goes, you meet me at house. I'm like, meet you at the house? I said, you like Dakota? She goes, yeah, meet me at house. I'm like, all right. So I go down there and I meet her. Literally, I go in there and there's the white piano and then just artwork everywhere.
The Imagine piano?
Yeah.
Come on.
And there's incredible artwork and drawings from John Lennon. And, and it's a massive, space that they had. I think it was the entire floor overlooking Central Park. And at one point, Yoko Ono comes out with these reams of letters, and she starts reading me these letters about how John Lennon had this disdain for Paul McCartney. I'll just leave it at that. I'm serious.
Come on.
And I was sitting there thinking, like, this is outrageous. And then finally, she's like, do you like Chinese food? And I said, yeah, I like Chinese food. She goes, I'll go send a driver to Mr. Chow's. So she's, we're eating Chinese food. Then the night ends, and I'm sitting in this amazing, amazing home of theirs, and she asks me to come back in another day or two to listen to her record. So I come back, go up, take my shoes off. You have to take your shoes off to go into their home, and she leads me into their bedroom.
No.
Yes, and she was going to play me her record. And I'm going to stop trying to talk like Yoko Ono did to me then. And she made me lay in the bed.
Come on.
To listen to her record.
Just like the Sleep In Montreal that her and John did?
Maybe. I mean, that's all I could think of. And it was actually, there were some really wonderful things on her record. And I got to come back yet another time, and I brought the head of marketing, the head of publicity. They had come from Los Angeles, and I said, I think it'd be a really great idea for them to come to meet you and hear the record, and she did it. And I was surprised, honestly, that she brought everybody to the Dakota, and it was the same thing. She made us all lay in the bed to listen to the record.
Wasn't there a time with Harry Chapin?
Harry Chapin.
Wasn't there another time that you were...
Well, the time I met John Lennon, he was with Harry Nilsson.
Oh, Harry Nilsson.
Yeah. And Harry Nilsson was unconscious, and John Lennon was banging on an electric piano, screaming at me, telling me what a worthless piece of shit he was and how he couldn't write a song. And I'm like, 20...
Where was this?
This was in my guy, Nat Weiss's apartment in New York, not at the Dakota.
And Lennon saying that he himself is a piece of shit.
Yeah, and he never wrote a song, and that he's just worthless. And he looks at me and he goes, I can't write a song. That guy's a songwriter. And I didn't know what to do. And I went over and I took Harry Nilsson's pulse and I said, John, I think we lost Harry Nilsson. And then minutes after that, Nat came back and I'm like, I'm out of here. Good luck with these two guys.
My God.
But, getting to go to the Dakota, meeting Yoko Ono was amazing. I've met a lot of great people in my life, talking about the Neville brothers and what you were saying about sitting with Chris Whitley and him saying thank you.
Yeah, yeah.
Those thank yous, when you get those thank yous from artists, are simply amazing. Yeah. That is a currency of heart and soul that the people that don't do this, it's not that they don't get it in life in some shape or form. They do, okay? But they don't know that specific moment of why a guy like you or me still lusts to do this, or want to do it, or why it's important. Because it is important. It's people's lives. It's their careers. It's their art. And it's their living. And talking about the Neville brothers, I'm so proud of that record. I get a text almost every day from 83-year-old Aaron Neville with a song or a song with a video and a little emoji like heart or a smile. And sometimes we talk.
To this day, you mean?
I got one this morning.
Come on.
I swear to God. I've got hundreds of them, and I don't know why he's doing it, and I need to talk to him because I'm like, are you doing this so I am entertained, or is there something I'm supposed to do?
Do a record on this boy.
to put this together? And I tried to get him on a record about a year and a half ago, on a Lou Reed record. Lou Reed went to his grave saying his favorite singer of all times was Aaron Neville. And they did a tribute record, and my friend Bill Bentley produced it. And he said, can you call Aaron? And I did, and it was after the pandemic. And I said, Aaron, they want you to sing, and I think you should do "Oh, What a Perfect Day," or any song you want to sing. And I said, Lou Reed went to his grave telling people, you are the greatest singer of all times. And he spoke very softly. He goes, Patrick, I'm 83 years old. My voice has changed. I don't sing like I used to, between the pandemic, and I have to pass.
Oh,
and I'm
my
like,
God.
Aaron, you talk better than 90% of the people who sing, all right? But I said, if that's your, position, I honor it. And yet I continue to hear from him, and it's such an honor,
That's incredible.
And the same thing with, the 15 years I got to work with Etta James.
Oh, God.
That was amazing. And, again, I spoke to her up until her death, and I'll never forget the last time I saw her. She was crying and distraught, and she was like, you're the only white guy that came to my mother's funeral. I said, well, that's not true, Etta. Josh, your music director and guitar player, he's a white guy too. And she goes, you guys aren't white, you're black Irish.
Didn't she play songs for you in her home?
Oh, all the time.
On piano?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Come on.
She would play records for me. She wouldn't play piano. She would play songs for me. It's like saying, okay, we're going to make a jazz record. We're going to make a blues record. We're going to make an R&B record. And I'd sit there and I'd listen to song after song. And I said, Etta, I've never heard that song before. I have no idea who wrote it, who's singing it, who produced it, when it was done, but it's smash. It's amazing. And she had an incredible passion for songs because of her being a singer.
We need to be doing a documentary on you, not a podcast.
Okay, we can do that.
I'm just
I
going to
still
say,
want to make a biopic of Etta's life.
Oh my God, you have to. And I would get a record done on Aaron. Drag him kicking and screaming. I'll engineer that record for free.
I don't think it's going to happen,
No.
but I just wonder if he wants me to sort of collect these things, these pearls that he keeps sending me, as if there's a way to present them. And I really do need to
Have that conversation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We need to do a part 2, if not 3, on this because there's just so much to touch on, and I should really start carrying a microphone in my pocket when we hang out because I swear every conversation and hang session should be a podcast. And
well, again, if you do something for a long time, you can get a lot of great stories. And again, I always told Tony, I was like, Tony, if the music business is done with me, I'm cool. I've got plenty of stories. I got plenty of friends. I still want to do it because I still love it, but it's not like I need more. And again, I've been blessed to do this for a long time. And it's gone up, down, and sideways. And that's the one thing people have to realize. If you're going to have a career, it's going to go up, down, and sideways. And as long as you never let go of even being on the fringe, you can make your way back to the center. But if you let go, you float away. And I tell a story about a man who's probably younger than I am today. 25, 30 years ago when I worked at A&M Records, and we're getting ready to hit golf balls in Colorado Springs by the Air Force Academy, watching jets take off and fly. And he said, boys, I want to tell you a story. I want to tell you something before we hit this next golf ball. And his name was Al Bergamo. He said, remember one thing, nobody leaves the music business. The music business leaves you.
Huh.
And I've said it countless times. I've told the story countless times. I've told it to my girlfriend, Tony the Tiger, where the point being is, if the music business is done with me, I'm cool. I can still listen to music. I can still be a fan. I'd still find a way to do this just as a hobbyist, I guess. Maybe I am still a hobbyist. I don't know. I am a hobbyist for sure, but
well, you keep sending me the most incredible artists. Patrick's always texting me, some new artists that he's working with, and they're always incredible, and it's, what's the next step is always, well, here's where they are and here's where they want to be, and that's what you've done for your whole career. But absolutely, you need to keep doing this. And I would say like when we get the most out of this and life in general is when we serve others.
Right.
And that's when we see something being bigger than ourselves. And I can't think of, first of all, I don't know anybody that loves live music more than you. I mean, if there's a live band, I'm probably hiding. It's like, how do I get out of here?
Right.
Where you are literally in the clubs in Nashville 7 days a week. I don't know anybody that loves going to see live music more than you. Not even close. Serving is something you don't see when you're younger. It's always about you and me and my lyrics, and you're here for me. Then the greatest entertainers always figured out. I remember Elvis says this thing in Graceland, had the headphones on, and his voice comes on in your ears, and I always pictured my career from the person in the first or third row and what they wanted me to sing next. Sinatra was the same way. These people figured out that it's not about me. I'm just the painter. I'm just the artist.
Right.
And without them giving back, I sing, you applaud. This is reciprocal. The best artists figured that out.
And you're absolutely right. And again, I got to see that when I worked for Nat, being around Bonnie Raitt, being around Peter Asher, being around Cat Stevens before he became Yusuf Islam, being around James Taylor. I learned that again working for Herb Alpert and Jerry Moss, and especially Herb, even now at 90s, out touring with the Tijuana Brass. And every night he talks about, wherever he's playing, that this moment here is not about me or my career. This is the greatest moment in my life because I get to do this for you. Mm-hmm. And even before I came into your house and I'm trying to figure out, what my lot in life is and reinventing myself, countless times. And I just tell people, I want to be of purpose. And if I can be of purpose, I want to be effective and I want to be efficient. And I'd like to make enough money so the bank doesn't take my house, so I can travel with Tony the Tiger and give money to my kids or perfect strangers or somebody else's kids. But it's still such a thrill when you get to impact on somebody in this vocation. And the same is true as I get to be around younger people all the time and learn from them and get a perspective on the world from them or a moment from them. And I tell everybody, Terry, in the last couple of years, and this is why I send stuff to you all the time, and I do it to other people as well, because one, I want to see if what people's reaction is. But I tell people, I said, if you read something interesting, send it to me. If you hear something interesting, send it to me. If you eat something really good, tell me where you got it or send me the recipe. And it's just like, life is... It's a beautiful thing, even though it's so challenging and having careers is challenging. And again, we're doing this and I'm doing this, it's a young man and young woman's game. And yet I think there's still such importance on experience and passion and knowledge and also a hunger to continue to learn and evolve with it all.
Yeah. Buddy, I just want to thank you for stopping by. We are definitely going to do, you just live up the road from me, so we're going to do episodes from time to time, and I just want to thank you for coming by today and getting the ball started at least, and I really appreciate you. I love you, buddy.
My delight.
Hey, Patrick, while I still have you here, please give me some details on where people can find you.
My email is the letter P, Clifford, CLIFFORD, the numeral 4, P Clifford 4 at M as in Mary, E as in Edward.com. And on Instagram, I'm PC Hollywood.
If today's episode lit a fire in you, don't let it fade. Subscribe to Sold for a Song, leave a review, and be the spark that helps others discover their own worth. And if you're ready to go deeper, my upcoming book, The Sold for a Song Academy, and one-on-one mentoring are all waiting for you inside my private portal. Visit Terrance Sawchuk.com. Let's build this movement together.